Hey family, how y'all doing? It's early today, but I am on a mission to stay committed to what I said I was going to do. So here we are this morning. We are going to finish this book, God Don't Like Ugly. We're going to dive directly into chapter 12 and go ahead and get it done this morning. It is, let me see, it's not that long, just a few pages. We're going to go ahead and get it done. So, chapter 12. Mary Monroe's God Don't Like Ugly, chapter 12. And hopefully you've been following along, and if not, I'm sorry, but you can go and pick up the videos. Chapters 1 through 11 are already posted on this channel. So we know that there was an incident in a locker room at the end of chapter 11 with the book bag and somebody getting jacked up and things like that. So here we are now in chapter 12. Kids talked about the incident in the locker room for days. What amazed me was the fact that Rhonda did not get into trouble. Pee Wee had told me that even some of the teachers were afraid of her, but I didn't know whether or not to believe them. But the more I thought about it, they must have been. Other kids got sent to the principal's office left and right. Rhonda almost never did. Yeah, some of the teachers are scared of me, Rhonda confirmed on our way to school a few days later. We were talking arm in arm like I saw a lot of best girlfriends do. Pee Wee was stumbling along behind us, mumbling something every now and then. It was like it was just Rhonda and me. We had a world of our own. Why? I asked her. We had some pretty scary teachers at our school. Oh, they think she crazy, Pee Wee offered. And 'cause her daddy's best friend, Mr. Anasati, I'm going to leave it there, Antonosati, richest man in town, is a mean-looking Italian with a scar on his jaw. Rhonda rolled her eyes at Pee Wee. Everybody thinks I'm crazy. She said it like it was something to be proud of. I don't think you're crazy. I just think you're different, I said gently. I want to be friends with you. I wanted to be friends with you the first time I saw you because I'm different too. I've never had a real girlfriend, I admitted. I squeezed my arm and smiled. Rhonda squeezed my arm and smiled. French fries are on the menu today for lunch. You can have mine. Okay, and you can watch me eat them. She's a little greedy pig. You can watch me eat them. If anybody gives you any shit today, let me know. I'll take care of them. Or I'll have my big brother beat them up real bad. See, now we know why people scared of her. Anybody? Life had taken a whole new meaning. I never thought I would have my own personal bodyguard, especially one that's smaller than you, right? Anybody. Jock can get beat up. Jock can beat up every kid in our school. He might be a prize fighter one day, and he needs to practice beating people. Rhonda bragged. Well, since y'all too busy to pay attention to me, I'm going to the rec room and hang out, Pee Wee informed us. We both ignored him, and he rushed off with a scowl on his face. Once we were in front of the school, I asked Rhonda in a weak voice, when you say anybody, you mean grown people too? This might be her wanting to get in on Mr. Boatwright. Let's just see. You mean grown people too? That's what she asked Rhonda. Grown people, Rhonda gasped. She gave me a hard look and glanced around before continuing. We can't sass grown people, let alone beat one up. I sassed the flight attendant on a plane from the Bahamas, and Aunt Lola whooped me with her shoe right in front of all those people on that plane. Okay, I muttered. But I bet your mean big brother Jack wouldn't he? Yeah, he would. He even sassed Reverend Upshaw last week. One time he beat up a 30-year-old old pimp for trying to put one of his girlfriends out on the street. I felt a sense of security for the first time since Mr. Boatwright had started abusing me. What would Jack do to somebody that was taking advantage of some girl, like raping her and, stuff like that? I don't know, Rhonda said quietly. She gave me a suspicious look. I guess it would depend on who the girl was. If it was one of his girlfriends or me, I am sure that Jack would kill the rapist. What if it wasn't one of his girlfriends or you? I asked. It was hard for me to hide my excitement. She looked at me for a long time before she responded. Teachers were looking at their watches and giving us mean looks, and I knew it was time for us to get to our first period class or face the wrath of the principal. Jack's not stupid. Why would he kill a rapist for raping some girl he didn't care anything about? Who is this girl? I thought you didn't have any friends. Oh, nobody. I was just wondering when she's going to actually tell it, because I know we're going to get to the point where she tells Rhonda that she's enduring that abuse. I left Rhonda standing in front of the school. Once I got inside, I peeped out the window and she was just standing there with this puzzled look on her face. I expected to meet her in the cafeteria for lunch, but Wanda Jones told me Rhonda had left school during third period study hall to go home because she had cramps. When I got home that evening, I had the house to myself for a few hours. Around 7, Mama stumbled in the front door with Judge Lawson close behind. They greeted me, ordered me to get them beer from the kitchen. Then they made themselves comfortable on the living room couch. "Where's Mr. Boatwright? I'm sure he'll want to join us," Judge Lawson said, looking around the room. He turned his beer bottle up and drained it, then let out a long, loud belch. "He wasn't home when I got it." The back door opened and slammed shut, and Mr. Boatwright's voice yipping a spiritual. "Well now," he exclaimed, rolling into the living room with his arms raised like somebody had pulled a gun on him. "Judge Lawson, you looking good? You looking well." "Ah, Mr. Boatwright, I can say the same about you." "Brother Boatwright, sit down here with us. Annette, run get Brother Boatwright a beer," Mama squealed. By the time I returned from the kitchen with his beer, Mr. Boatwright had manipulated an invitation for himself to attend some of Judge Lawson's poker parties. "Oh, you're welcome to attend any time you'd like, but I must warn you, the stakes are pretty high," the judge informed him. "I can handle it. I can handle it. I can handle it," Mr. Boatwright grinned. "Mr. Boatwright need more of a social life," Mama said gently. "I feel so bad he spends so much time cooped up in the house keeping Annette in line when he ought to be out sowing his wild oats like other men." Mama paused and sucked in her breath, then turned around to face me. "You're a big girl now. You can't continue to have Brother Boatwright all to yourself. Turn him loose. I know you hopeless attached to him. Then replace your daddy with him. But he got to have him some fun too. You ought to be responsible enough to spend time by yourself and not burn the house down." "Yes, ma'am. I can take care of myself now," I replied. I turned my head down the hall so they wouldn't see me smiling. Now, Annette is a big old girl, and so I'm a little confused at her mom, where you feeling like she needs to be taken care of all the time anyway. And I bet down on the inside, Annette is just jumping and screaming for joy, like, "Chick, you ain't saying nothing but some good stuff. You ain't doing nothing but threatening to make my day by letting this man go. And what are you thinking? You think that I've replaced the thought of him with the thought of my dad, replaced the thought of my daddy with the thought of him. No way, sister. You have no idea how this man is abusing and mistreating me. And if you just spy a little bit with your little eye, open it up, you probably would be made aware of it." I'm just so concerned because I feel like back in the days, a lot of young women were misused and abused by the men in their households, and nobody said anything. I feel like they knew, but just wouldn't do anything about it. But that's a whole nother story. We just gonna come back to that a different time. "How was your day, Brother Boatwright? You go anywhere special today?" Mama asked. Mr. Boatwright nodded and took a drink of his beer before speaking. "Sister Goody, I picked up some Royal Crown hair grease from the store like you asked me to for when you straightening Annette's hair. Judge Lawson looked amused. I hated when black people talked about black things white people didn't know about. Once when Mama and I was shopping at Pluto's Five and Dime, she asked the young clerk where the straightening combs at. Puzzled, the clerk laughed and asked, "The what?" The clerk was confused, amused, and red-faced by the time Mama finished explaining. "You people have to do all that to your hair?" the clerk questioned. Looking at the knotty mess on my head, I wanted to crawl into a hole. We had to find a black clerk to help us find the straightening combs. Judge Lawson cleared his throat and shuffled around in his seat. "Mr. Boatwright, you might want to try a sip of this chinati here." I don't know what that is. Chinati here, he asked, moving the bag from inside his coat pocket. "It's real nice and potent," Mama said. Mama was not a sophisticated woman, but she had worked for and socialized with enough sophisticated people to have some degree of class. She knew the fine wine. From the look on his face, I knew that Mr. Boatwright didn't have a clue as to what Chianati was. I read in a Hush Hush magazine that Chianati is Frank Sinatra's favorite drink, I offered. Mr. Boatwright snapped around and looked at me. He couldn't stand when Annette had something and knew something. "I like Chianati," he mumbled, clearing his throat. I'd seen his Ripple, Thunderbird, and Muscatel bottles in the trash, but never any Chianati bottles. "Go get some glasses, youngin'," Mama ordered. Mama kept talking without looking at me. "They serve only the most expensive Chianati at Antonosati's restaurant. And with him already rich and still charging folks high prices for everything in there, well, that suspicious Dago wouldn't have the money he got now or be walking around a free man if it wasn't for Judge Lawson here. He was lucky Judge Lawson was still on the bench all them times he had tax problems and liquor license problems, running wild with that flashy undertaker across the street. Unspeakable. How many times that undertaker wound up in your courtroom, Judge?" Mr. Boatwright croaked, winking at Judge Lawson. Mr. Boatwright always wanted tea. He always trying to gossip about somebody and you living with some woman and abusing her daughter. Get the tea on that. Ugh. "I've known Nelson for years, and he's never been in trouble with the law as far as I've known. His reputation is flawless," Judge Lawson said with a thoughtful look on his face. I couldn't imagine what he must have thought about Mr. Boatwright. At times I couldn't help but feel sorry for Mr. Boatwright. There were so many things about him I didn't know, like his family background and how he had been raised. But it was obvious he had not had much of a life. I had not had much of a life either, and I resented rich people up to a point, but my bitterness was nothing compared to his. I assumed it was because of his difference and the difference in our ages. His jealousy and resentment towards rich people stunned me because the same people he trashed treated him with nothing but respect and kindness. Judge Lawson didn't bat an eye when Mr. Boatwright drank 3 glasses of his Chianati. By the time all the alcohol was gone, Mr. Boatwright was so drunk, Mama and the judge had to help him to bed. I slept well that night and the next night, mainly because the next night Mr. Boatwright attended Judge's poker party and didn't get home until way past midnight. When I got home from school the next day, he still had a hungover and was stretched out on the couch with an ice pack on his forehead. Saved again. I didn't like to admit it, but I was glad he felt so bad. I didn't have to worry about him harassing me. I turned on the television and curled up on the floor. "I can cook if you want me to," I offered. "You don't look too good." "There's the rest of that neck bone casserole from Sunday in the kitchen. You can heat it up," he moaned with a grimace on his face. I didn't feel a little sorry for him. I did feel a little sorry for him, a correction. She said I did. I did feel a little sorry for him, but it was his own fault. A man his age had no business drinking so much, especially when he knows better. Mary Monroe had been dead almost a year. and some of the television stations were still doing specials about her. One we had seen before was being run again. Mr. Boatwright gasped when they showed the scene from the 7-year itch when Marilyn's dress flies up. I was lying on my stomach. I had froze when I felt his toes rubbing my behind. Ugh. So, of course, when he saw the dress rise up, that kind of turned him up, the tingle in his turn on a little bit. So he running his toes up the girl's butt. Ugh. He is just so lousy. Ugh. So lousy. Um, I thought you were sick, I snarled, rolling around to face him. I leaped up from the floor and started to back away. I ain't that sick. You know how Marilyn Monroe make my nature rise. He stood up grinning. Ooh, wee girl. Before I could respond, somebody knocked on the front door. Ooh, yes, Jesus. Mr. Boatwright crept over to the front window and cracked the curtain open just enough to see out. It's the Undertaker. That uppity spook brother Nelson. He hissed, running behind the couch. Go tell him I'm sick and in the bed with a fever. My mouth dropped open and I almost laughed. I can't fix my lips to say all that with a straight face. A smart man like Mr. Nelson would see through that lie with his eyes closed. Mr. Nelson knocked some more, this time longer and harder. Well, just tell him I ain't home. Without another word, Mr. Boatwright dropped to the floor with a loud thud. Remembering the time Mama had hidden behind the couch from the bill collector in Florida, I checked to make sure his feet were not sticking out. I rushed around the floor and snatched open the door. Hi, Mr. Nelson, I smiled nervously. He looked more handsome than ever. He had a big beige suit, a black tie, a black hat. Hiya, Ned, he said, tipping his hat. He was not smiling. Is Mr. Boatwright available? I was nervous and frightened, but I lied for Mr. Boatwright. No. Are you sure? I saw him on the front porch not too long ago. He went to a prayer meeting, I think. He left out the back door, I think. He won't be home till real late, I think. Do you want me to tell him something? I had a hard time lying to certain people. Mr. Nelson was one of those people. Well, yes, he hesitated. Tell him I came to see him concerning a financial matter. He started to back off the porch. I opened the door wider and leaned my head onto the porch. It was getting cold, and the night air stung my face and ears. A financial matter, I asked, puzzled. He'll know. Mr. Nelson smiled mysteriously, tipped his hat again, then left. I waited until I saw him go inside his house. I shut and locked the door and ran to the couch where Mr. Boatwright was still crouched on the floor with his face covered in sweat. He's gone, he whispered, rising. He gone, he whispered, rising. He pulled out his pills and a handkerchief. Yeah. He said something about a financial matter, I said levelly, helping him onto the couch. Mr. Boatwright shook his head and signaled with an expression, wiping his face so hard he looked like he was in pain. The Mary Monroe special was still on, so I didn't sit too close to him. I sat on a chair facing the couch. He took his time replying. In the first place, with all them Samnions he got stashed away in the bank, he got some nerve coming over here to pester me about a measly $500 this time of night, Mr. Boatwright informed me. There was a look of total amazement on his face. If I had known Brother Nelson was such a Shylock, I'd have borrowed from him that Italian buddy of his in the first place, like his brother Johnny done. You borrowed $500 from Mr. Nelson. For what? I smiled. For the poker game I got dragged into last night at Judge Lawson's house. Why would you lend that kind of money? Why would he lend that kind of money to you when he knows your only income is a monthly disability check? I was thoroughly stunned, 'cause I thought I could borrow against my life insurance policy. Them dogs down at the insurance company say there's a 36-day waiting period. If they don't have my money ready in exactly 36 days, I'm going to sue them. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. Why don't you tell Mr. Nelson that? Otherwise, you're going to have to hide from him for 30 days. I pointed out. Mr. Boatwright looked frightened. His eyes shifted from left to right like he was trying to come up with a plan. Scary Mary going to let me borrow it from her tomorrow after she go to the bank. He sighed with uncertainty. But I ain't certain on that unpredictable heifer. She full of surprises. Told me she was saving up so she can buy her some reliable transportation. The broomstick she probably going to buy can't cost that much. She'll buy a broomstick as reliable transportation, so he's calling her a witch. He laughed, then suddenly gave me a thoughtful look. Then Scary Mary will have to wait for your insurance to pay off. Well, I figured I'd pay off the undertaker and wait a few days, borrow the money back, then pay Scary Mary. I let it sit in her pocket for a few days, borrow it again, pay back Brother Nelson again, and so on. Mr. Boatwright was still talking, but I had stopped listening because he planning on borrowing it from her to pay him back. A few days later, borrowing it from him to pay her back. A few days later, borrowing it from her to pay him back, and so on and so forth, back and forth for the next 36 days until his insurance loan comes up. He got a show enough plan, I guess. So she done stopped listening to him. He finally stopped babbling, but I tried to get him. Started again. Anything to distract him, of course, right? It couldn't be long before Mama got home, and he wouldn't have time to bother me if I kept him talking long enough. Nice strategy in that. All rich people think about is money, I insisted, nodding for emphasis. I was totally on Mr. Nelson's side, but Mr. Boatwright didn't need to know that. That's how they got rich, Mr. Boatwright snapped. He babbed on about his evils on rich people until Madeira got home about an hour later. Whew, she's safe. She managed to get him and keep him talking until her mama got home so that she would not have to deal with him putting his nasty fingers and body parts all over her where he shouldn't be putting him. And so, YouTube family, that concludes chapter 12 of Mary Monroe's God Don't Like Ugly. We will be indulging in chapter 13 very, very, very soon, if not tomorrow. If not tonight, then tomorrow. Thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you all really soon. Now I got to get ready for class. Thank you so much. Peace and blessings to you all.